West African Ministers of Science and Technology have met in Accra on how to pool resources to fight the effects of climate change. The region is one of the most vulnerable to climate change. Extreme poverty, natural disasters such as droughts and floods, and heavy dependence of agriculture on rainfall further increases the region's vulnerability. The situation is further worsened by the poor state of economic development and how adaptive capacity.
Rising temperatures, prolonged droughts, unfertile lands, dried water bodies and flooding are among many of the effects of climate change globally. Reports indicate that though the effect of climate change is a global challenge, Africa bears the negative impact of climate change due to the lack of resources in terms of finance, technology transfer and capacity building to fight the negative effects of climate change. The West African Science Service Center on Climate Change and Adapted Land Use, WASCAL, was therefore formed in 2012 by 10 West African countries to find an appropriate response to the phenomenon of global warming and climate change. With a €50 million funding from the German government, WASCAL is engaged in programs such as the establishment of climate science service centers across the sub-region to train experts capable of solving some of the scientific challenges of climate change. The meeting in Accra by West African Ministers of Science and Technology provided a platform for member countries to take stock of efforts made so far by each country in fighting global warming.
The seriousness of the threats that climate change poses to the survival of humanity demand collective action to address the challenges of keeping global warming below the 2 degrees target. This therefore calls for adequate and timely provision of resources in terms of finance, technology transfer, and capacity building to enable especially developing countries like us to effectively adapt to the negative impacts of climate change.
German Ambassador to Ghana, Mr. Rudiger John, urged member countries to make good use of funds from the German government.
German funding will not last forever. Just see it as a start-up kit to support you in creating, building the first capacities, buildings and resources.
West African countries who constitute WASCAL are Ghana, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Gambia, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Senegal and Togo.
Ghana is leading 6 West African countries to develop ways to prevent policy slippage in IMF bailouts. Speaking at a session for stakeholders at Akonsombo, the Director General of the West African Monetary Institute, Dr. Abuaku Englama, said Ghana can only benefit from the recently initialed IMF package if experts are trained to maximize the gains. Dr. Englama also called for closer monitoring of areas into which the funds will be channeled in order to measure gains and losses. Failure to implement these structures will mean that Ghana will have to pay the loan without benefits. Dr. Englama said effective broad-border banking and finance in the region has taken a new twist, which calls for intensive education to meet the new challenges. For the past 4 years, the SOS Children's Villages Ghana has continued to support the government in providing employable skills to the youth. At Asokore Mampong in Ashanti, a career fair has been organized for beneficiaries of the SOS Family Strengthening Programme. Creating jobs for the youth remains a challenge for governments, especially in the developing world. In Ghana, for instance, the government is supported by a number of NGOs to meet the demands of youth unemployment. An NGO, SOS Children's Village in Ashanti, Eastern and Northern region, apart from providing a home for vulnerable children, is also providing over 100 youth, mostly school dropouts in the Asokore Mampong community, with employable skills. They were taken through a year's technical, vocational and educational training program for skills in hairdressing, dressmaking, carpentry, masonry, tie and dye, auto mechanic fitting and general electronics. To motivate them, A career fair has been organized for selected graduates from the hairdressing course at Asokore Mampong. Mr. Joseph Yane of the SOS Children's Villages told GBC 24 that a monitoring program is in place to ensure that beneficiaries use the skills and resources provided to make a living. The project coordinator, Madame Mavis Ekpe, noted that while equipping the youth with financially sustainable skills, it will also help reduce teenage pregnancy, crude abortions, and alleviate poverty in the community. The graduates were grateful to the SOS Children's Villages for their support.